Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and there's people who are like, well, I'm against abortion always. I'm glad that happened. And other people are like, what about cases of rape and incest? And they're like, what about it? And they're like, well, a bunch of these states' trigger laws don't make exception for that. Do you think that someone who's experienced that should be forced to carry the child? And they're like, you're speaking in hypotheticals. That's so few and far between. It's not like that's what's happening. It just happened. Yeah. 10-year-old in Ohio goes to a child abuse doctor, finds out she's pregnant from a rape 3 days too late. And the doctor's like, I'm sorry, I can't terminate this in the state of Ohio.
So many conservative arguments typically boil back to, I don't really care, I want to think about this. So again, we're all familiar with the tragic story of the 10-year-old rape victim being denied access to abortion in Ohio, and how, a lot of the time, people can say, oh, well, those cases are few and far in between. But again, it's because they're not thinking at a macro scale. The reality is that there's over 300 million people in this country, quite a bit more than 300 million people in this country. So when you look at things at a macro level, the tragic story that happened to this poor girl in Ohio is happening, hundreds, thousands of cases over the collection of years, because now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, this type of stuff is going to be happening, because it does happen. And we can't just wave off these people, of course, until it happens to one of their family members. And of course, no one would wish that. But that's the reality of that type of thinking. You don't care until it becomes a reality for someone that's important in your life. But the sad truth is that these types of cases are going to become things that we're all too familiar with going forward.
Fortunately, that doctor called people in Indiana where it was still legal and was able to send the girl there. But pretty soon, there's new legislation in Ohio that would make sending someone out of state for it a crime. Aiding and abetting a crime.
And another argument that can be commonly made, even from people who may not even mean ill from saying it, they can say, oh, well, people can always just drive to another state. Well, that's if they can afford to. If they can afford to take off work to do that, if they even have a car to do it. The tragic things happen. They think like, oh, well, it's just young women being irresponsible. But, fathers die. All types of things happen. People get molested and raped, as we just talked about, as we're talking about now. There's all types of issues that happen. People may not be able to afford to take off work. And then, of course, there's laws that are going into place to where if you go out of state and get this done, not only you will be held liable for it, but the doctor who performed the procedure as well. And of course, as we've discussed, how are they going to, enforce these laws? Through surveillance. And that's the biggest difference between Roe v. Wade not being in place these days than before 1973 when it was implemented, because our technology is simply just so much more advanced than it was back then.
But hey, no worries. Ohio Republican Jean Schmidt there, she says that young girl shouldn't be upset about the fact she has to carry that child of her rapist. She should see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity. Yeah, I'm guessing those hypotheticals you don't care to hear about would pack a real different punch if that was your 10-year-old daughter.
Just over the 4th of July weekend, there's so much stuff happening, and then this shooting in Highland Park. It's so difficult to keep up with everything. But what's for sure and for certain is that we need Democrats who are going to act. And I always talk about making sure that we put our own people in there. But, it's just so unfortunate to think that we're going to start to see regularly in the news, regularly on the websites and the blogs, cases of women who are getting thrown in jail because they had miscarriages, cases of young girls who are 10, 11, 12 years old who are forced to carry babies to term, and, people in high places saying, oh, well, perhaps it was an opportunity. Perhaps she can use, whatever that nonsense is, that, of course, if it happened to their family members or themselves, they wouldn't put up with it. They wouldn't deal with it. They do what needed to be done. And as we know, the people at the top of society, these types of laws don't apply to them anyway. So it's just horrible to know that we're going to be seeing these types of stories over and over and over again. And it's even more worse to know that the Democrats have had so many an opportunity to stop this from happening. So moving forward, we have to make sure that we're the change that we need.